America's most famous rifle carries the name of a man who never designed a gun in his life. Picture two men. One bends over a workbench in a Connecticut shop, filing steel by lamplight, learning the way a cartridge feeds by feel alone. The other sits across town counting shirts, collars, inventory, and profit. By the time both were dead, the shop worker had vanished from the story, and the shirt seller's name was stamped into steel and carried across a continent. This isn't the story of one unlucky inventor, it's a pattern. The men who built America's greatest rifles were again and again erased or ruined by the very guns that made everyone else rich. Their hands cut the metal, another man's name went on it. The credit ran one way, the cost ran the other, and no one ever counted it. Say the word Winchester in a gun shop today, and something shifts. The word carries weight. It sounds like the frontier itself, like something that was always simply true. Nobody at the counter stops to ask whether Winchester ever built a rifle. The name has outrun the man that completely. The answer is stranger than the silence. Oliver Winchester made shirts. The rifle that made his name immortal was drawn and filed by another man, a gunsmith named Benjamin Tyler Henry, who died in an obscurity most Americans have never heard of. And Henry is only the first name on a longer list. Walter Hunt, Christian Sharps, John Garand. 4 men, 4 rifles, 4 eras. Each built a gun the country fell in love with. Each watched the fortune or the name settle onto somebody else. A rifle on the wall is never only a rifle, it's a record of who got the credit and who got left off. Start with the rifle because it was real and it was remarkable. In 1860, in New Haven, Connecticut, Benjamin Tyler Henry patented a lever-action repeater fed by a new brass cartridge of his own design. It held more than a dozen rounds and fired them as fast as a man could work the lever. In an army still issuing muzzle loaders that took most of a minute to reload, that was close to witchcraft. Confederate soldiers who faced it are said to have called it the rifle you loaded on Sunday and fired all week, a line more legend than record, but it captures the fear it put into the men on the wrong end of it. Henry was born in Claremont, New Hampshire in 1821, and he'd been shaping metal since boyhood. He tested a design not with a chart but with his hands, feeling for the small catch where a cartridge might hang, filing until it fed clean. The rifle carried his name because the rifle was his. What it did not carry was any promise about who'd keep the money it made. That's where the second man walks in. Oliver Winchester never filed a rifle in his life. What he had was capital and an instinct for it. The largest single investor in a struggling little firm built around this new repeating design. Henry ran the shop floor. Winchester ran the ledger. On the surface, that split looked ordinary. Someone has to buy the steel, meet the payroll, absorb the loss when sales are slow. Winchester did all of it, and did it well. Underneath was the oldest argument in American work. Who owns the thing a man makes with his hands, the one who imagined it, or the one who financed it? For a while, neither had to answer. Then the rifle got famous, and one of them decided to take the whole thing back. If this is the kind of history you come here for, the argument under the argument, take a second to like this video and subscribe. The fight over that rifle is the clean, public part. Who Winchester actually was, and the crueler case still ahead, are not. To understand how a shirt maker's name ended up on the rifle, go back before either man to a New York mechanic named Walter Hunt. Hunt is one of the strangest figures in American invention because he invented constantly and kept almost none of it. In 1848, he patented a repeating rifle he called the volition repeater, fed by a metallic ball carrying its own powder, decades ahead of the muzzle loaders around it. It didn't work well, and Hunt had neither the money nor the patience to fix it, so he sold the design and moved on. That was his whole life. The same man patented the safety pin, the small brass object in a drawer in nearly every American home, and sold every right to it for $400 to clear a debt. Others made fortunes on it. Hunt never earned another cent. He died in 1859, and whether he died poor or merely modest is something his biographers still argue. What none of them dispute is that the value he created almost never stayed with him. His rifle didn't die with him. It passed to an investor, then to a shop in Vermont, then to two young men named Smith and Wesson, then into a company called Volcanic. Every step improved it. Every step carried it further from the hand that first imagined it. Waiting at the end of that chain, as the largest stockholder, was Oliver Winchester. And Winchester knew that world from the inside because he'd already conquered a corner of it. In 1848, he patented an improvement to the men's dress shirt and built a factory in New Haven to make them. By 1860, it ran hundreds of sewing machines, turning out thousands of shirts a week. Sit with that detail. The efficiency that built a rifle empire was first perfected on collars and cuffs. Winchester didn't love guns, he loved manufacturing. A rifle was a product like a shirt, and his gift was owning it, building it, selling it to a whole country. Invention had quietly become something you could buy. Then the war came, and the rifle stopped being a curiosity. Henry's repeater reached Union soldiers in the middle of the Civil War, and the men carrying it understood at once what they held. One Union officer, a major named Curtis, called it far superior in all respects to anything else he could get. Soldiers spent their own pay to buy them. Somewhere between 12 and 14,000 were made, not many, but the reputation ran far ahead of the count. Here's the human thing under the ballistics. A repeating rifle was never really about firepower. It was about the terror of the empty gun, that exposed moment after a shot when a man with a muzzle loader is fumbling with powder and ball while the world comes at him. The Henry shortened that moment. In the most literal sense, it handed a frightened man a few more seconds of his life. That's why it sold, and why the question of who owned it stopped being an accounting detail and became a fight. The break, when it came, was not quiet. By the mid-1860s, Henry had had enough. He believed, with some reason, that he'd been underpaid for the thing that built the whole company. So while Winchester was away in Europe, he went to the Connecticut legislature and petitioned it to hand him ownership of the company and to rename it after himself. Picture the nerve that took. A shop superintendent going over his employer's head to the state, trying to walk out with the entire company while the boss was at sea. It wasn't a private grievance. It was a public grab, made in the open, with his reputation on the table. And it was a misreading. Henry understood rifles better than anyone alive. He didn't understand Oliver Winchester at all. Winchester came back fast. What he did next was not loud, and it didn't need to be. He restructured the company Henry was trying to seize right out from under him, and gave the new entity the one name that would matter for the next 140 years, the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Then he handed Henry's rifle to a different man, a superintendent named Nelson King, who redesigned how it loaded and rolled out an improved model in 1866. And Benjamin Tyler Henry, whose hands had made the rifle, whose name was on the patent, whose gun had just helped win a war, drifted out of his own story. He went back to quiet work as a gunsmith and lived until 1898. The company grown from his rifle became one of the most famous names on earth. It was not his name. It would be easy to close there with a villain. The shirt seller robbed the craftsman. But the truth is colder and more interesting. Winchester was not a thief in any simple sense. Look at what he actually did. The rifle Henry perfected began as Walter Hunt's failure, a clever idea that couldn't survive the real world, and passed through a string of companies that went broke trying to make it pay. Left to inventors alone, that whole lineage might have died in a workshop. What Winchester supplied was the one thing the brilliant hands never had: the capital to absorb years of losses, the factory to build at scale, the nerve to sell. Without the craftsman, there's no rifle. Without the shirt seller, there's no rifle either. And Henry, for all the injustice done to him, had tried to take an entire company through a legislative side door while his employer was out of the country. He was wronged. He was also no saint, Both are true, and holding them together is the actual story. A shirt collar and a rifle receiver on the same bench from the same kind of factory, owned by the same man. That's not a betrayal. It's how American industry worked. The hand made the thing, the name owned it. And it was about to happen again, to men Winchester never met. It happened to Christian Sharps. Sharps patented his rifle in 1848, a single-shot breech-loader that became one of the most respected long-range rifles in the country, the gun of buffalo hunters and champion marksmen. His deal entitled him to a royalty of $1 a gun. He didn't keep even that for long. By the accounts of men who worked with him, Sharps was a difficult partner and a poor businessman. One associate called him an impractical dreamer. He sold off his interest and left the firm carrying his name years before that name became famous. He spent his last years raising trout in Vernon, Connecticut, and in 1874 he died of tuberculosis. The record of where he was buried is thin enough that his own resting place is uncertain. The company bearing his name outlived him by 7 years, then went bankrupt. The rifle is still spoken of with reverence. The man is a footnote in his own legend. By now, the pattern is hard to miss. But nothing in it prepared anyone for the last case, because the last man actually got his name on the gun, and it still wasn't enough. John Garand designed the rifle that carried America through its largest war. Born on a Quebec farm in 1888, he came to New England as a boy, learned machine sweeping a textile mill, and spent his working life as a government engineer at the Springfield Armory. There, across 15 patient years, he built the M1, the first semi-automatic rifle to become standard issue for any nation's infantry. General Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. More than 6 million were made. People still call it simply the Garand. Here's the part that should stop you. In January 1936, Garand signed over every patent right he held to the United States government. He never earned $1 in royalties on those 6 million rifles. He drew a civil servant salary and nothing else. When some in Congress moved to award him a bonus of $100,000 in thanks, a sliver of what the rifle was worth, the bill died. There's a complication, and it matters. Garand was, in fact, the highest-paid engineer at the Armory. He wasn't mistreated in any ordinary way. He was respected, decorated, comfortable. But sit with the shape of it. The man got the one thing all the others were denied, his own name fixed permanently to his creation, and the money still went somewhere else. The name he won turned out to be the cheapest part of the deal, which is what the whole argument was really about. Not the name, never the name. It was always about who owns the value a maker makes, and in America, that was almost never the maker. Walk into any gun shop today, and the names are everywhere. Winchester is stamped on ammunition and on rifles still built under license long after the original company left New Haven. The great factory there finally closed in 2006 after 140 years. The Garand is spoken of at shooting matches with something close to love. Reproductions of the Sharps still go out to the firing line every season, and Walter Hunt's safety pin is still holding the country together, one drawer at a time, under a name almost nobody remembers is his. The names became immortal, the hands became invisible. So the argument never actually ended. It just went quiet and moved to the counter. Somewhere in America this week, a young hunter picked up a rifle and said the word Winchester, or the word Garand, the way you'd state a fact about the weather, certain, easy, inherited. He didn't know there'd been a Henry. He never heard of Hunt or Sharps or a legislature in Connecticut or a bill that died in Congress. He knew the name because the name is the part that survived. The hand does the making, the name does the lasting, and the whole history hides in the gap between them, folded into a single word nobody thinks to question. So the next time you hear one of those names said like Scripture, ask the quieter question underneath it. Whose hands and whose name? and why we only ever remember one. If a story like this is worth your time, like it, subscribe, and tell me in the comments. When a gun goes down in history, whose name really belongs on it? The man who built it or the man who owned it?